They say betrayal is a choice. That people who cheat always know what they're doing, that they step willingly into the fire, knowing they'll burn. But that's not true. Because if you had told me, just a year ago, that I would be standing in a darkened room, breathless, tangled in sheets that weren't my own, waiting for a man who wasn't my husband, I would have laughed. I would have sworn it would never happen. And yet, it did. It didn't start with a kiss. It didn't even start with a touch. It started with a conversation. A simple, harmless moment. A neighbor who smiled at me a second too long. A glance that held just a little more warmth than it should have. A voice that lingered in my head long after the words had faded. I wasn't looking for trouble. I wasn't searching for an escape. But sometimes, temptation doesn't knock. It doesn't give you time to think. It creeps in, soft, slow, unassuming, until suddenly it's everywhere. And before I knew it, I was standing at the edge of a decision that would change my life forever. If you think you know how this ends, trust me, you don't. They say love changes over time. That passion fades, that the excitement of the early years gets replaced by comfort, by routine. Maybe that's true. Maybe that's just the way things are meant to be. But no one ever tells you what to do when comfort starts to feel like absence. When routine starts to feel like loneliness. Adil is a good man. A provider. A responsible husband. He pays the bills on time. He makes sure there's gas in my car. He tells me when it's going to rain so I don't forget to take an umbrella. But he doesn't look at me the way he used to. Not anymore. Our conversations are practical, grocery lists, the kids' schedules, who's picking up dry cleaning. The love is still there, I think, but it's quiet. Too quiet. And sometimes, I wonder if he even sees me at all. And then there's him. Zaid. The neighbor. The man next door. The one who smiles just a little too long, whose voice lingers in the air even after he's gone. At first, it was nothing. Just friendly exchanges. Small talk. A warm smile over the fence. A simple, casual wave when passing each other on the street. But then, something shifted. One evening, I stepped outside for fresh air, hoping for silence, for a break from the weight of the ordinary. And he was there. Sitting on his porch, his eyes meeting mine before I could look away. "Long day?" he asked. I nodded. "You carry it well," he said. It was a simple compliment. Harmless. But the way he said it, the way his voice softened when he spoke to me, it felt different. It felt like he saw something in me that I had forgotten was even there. And that's when it started. I began noticing him more. The way he moved, the way he laughed, the way his presence filled the air around him. I told myself it was nothing. That it was just admiration. Just appreciation. That it was normal to enjoy a conversation, to feel heard, to feel seen. But deep down I knew. I knew because every time I stepped outside, I hoped he would be there. I knew because when he spoke, I listened too closely. I knew because when he walked away, I felt it, a pull, a lingering, a hunger I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't looking for trouble. I wasn't searching for something outside my marriage. But the way he made me feel, it was dangerous. And yet, I couldn't walk away. It started on a night when everything was quiet. The kind of quiet that presses against your skin, that makes you notice things you shouldn't. The power had gone out, and for a moment, I stood in the darkness, listening to the hum of silence around me. I stepped outside, needing air, needing space. And then I saw him. Zaid. He was standing on his porch, lantern in hand, his face half lit by the glow. Our eyes met, and in that moment, I felt something shift. "Looks like we're the only ones awake," he said, his voice smooth, easy. I should have smiled politely, should have turned back inside. But I didn't. Instead, he tilted his head toward his open door. "Come inside. I just made tea." I hesitated. My heart was pounding in a way I didn't understand. But my feet moved before my mind could catch up. I followed him. Inside, the air was warm, scented with cardamom and something else, something intoxicating. I wrapped my hands around the cup he placed in front of me, but my fingers felt numb. I could feel his eyes on me, studying me, waiting for me to say something. "I don't do this," I whispered. A small smile played on his lips. "Neither do I." The words should have meant nothing, but the way he said them, they meant everything. The stolen moments became routine. A glance too long. A touch too familiar. A conversation that lingered in the air long after it ended. I told myself it was harmless. That it was just words, just attention, just something to fill the empty spaces of my life. But then came the afternoon that changed everything. I had stopped by his house to return a book he had lent me. A simple exchange. A few seconds at the door. That's what it was supposed to be. But I stepped inside. And the door closed behind me. The air between us was thick, charged, as if we both knew something was coming but neither of us wanted to be the first to speak it into existence. He stood close, too close. I could feel his breath against my skin, warm, uncertain, waiting. "Tell me to stop." His voice was low, strained, almost pleading. I should have said it. I should have turned away. I should have done 100 things. But I didn't. The first touch was hesitant, uncertain, a question waiting to be answered. His fingers brushed my arm feather-light, as if giving me a final chance to step away. I didn't move. And then he kissed me. Slow at first, hesitant, a whisper of something we both knew we weren't supposed to have. But the hesitation didn't last. The kiss deepened, grew urgent, as if we were both trying to make up for lost time. His hands gripped my waist, pulling me closer, and in that moment, nothing else existed. Not my husband, not my home, not the life I was supposed to be protecting. Only him. Only this. I should have stopped. I should have walked away. But I didn't. And in that moment, I didn't care. At first, it was easy. A stolen hour in the middle of the day. A whispered conversation in the driveway. A lingering touch in the shadows of my own home. We found ways. When Adil left for work, when the neighborhood was quiet, when the world wasn't looking, Zaid and I existed in a space that didn't belong to reality. But reality always finds a way back in. And the more time I spent with him, the more I craved him. Every touch became reckless. Every kiss felt like an open invitation for disaster. And yet, I couldn't stop. The more we risked, the more intoxicating it became. I still played the role of the perfect wife. I still smiled when I was supposed to, still cooked dinner, still answered Adil's questions with the same practiced ease. But inside, I was someone else entirely. I wasn't just a wife anymore. I was a woman living 2 lives. And the thrill of it was unbearable. The danger should have terrified me. The thought of getting caught should have made me pull away. But it only made me want him more. I lived for the moments when Zaid's fingers would brush against mine in passing. For the hushed conversations in his doorway, where the risk was too great but the temptation was greater. The secrecy wasn't just necessary, it was the fuel that kept the fire burning. I had become someone I no longer recognized. And yet, I had never felt more alive. Zaid looked at me like I was something to be cherished. He listened. He remembered the small things, the books I liked, the way I took my tea, the song that always made me smile. He made me laugh. He made me feel beautiful. He made me feel wanted. And with Adil? With Adil, it was duty. It was routine. It was knowing exactly how the night would end before it even began. The touch that once made me melt now felt obligatory. The conversations that once lasted for hours now ended in silence. I wasn't his Layla anymore. I was just his wife. I thought we were careful. I thought we were invisible. But affairs have a way of leaving traces, tiny, almost imperceptible signs that something isn't quite right. I was too distracted to notice them. Too caught up in the way Zaid's lips felt against my skin. Too lost in the way his hands gripped my waist, pulling me closer like I was something he couldn't bear to let go. I was too consumed to realize that someone else was watching. That someone else had started to notice the way I smiled when I got a message I shouldn't have received. That someone else had been paying attention to the way I left the house more often, to the way my voice softened when I said certain names. Adil. He wasn't blind. And soon, I would learn that even the quietest men don't stay quiet forever. I had spent so much time convincing myself that we were careful, that we were untouchable, that no one would ever know. But secrets have a way of unraveling. And that night, my world did just that. Asterisk. Asterisk, it was late. Too late. Zaid's hands were still on me, his breath warm against my skin, the air between us thick with everything we had refused to resist. And then I heard it. The front door. The sound was quiet, but in that moment, it was deafening. Panic surged through me like fire. I turned, and he was there. Adil. He wasn't supposed to be home. Not yet. But he was. And he was standing in the doorway, looking at me. Looking at us. He didn't see everything. But he saw enough. Layla. His voice was quiet. Too quiet. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My throat was dry. My hands were trembling. He took a single step forward, his eyes locked onto mine. And in that moment I knew, there was no talking my way out of this. No excuses. No explanations. No more lies. Everything I had built. Everything I had taken for granted. It was over. Asterisk. Asterisk, I braced myself for the shouting. For the anger. For the accusations I knew I deserved. But none of that came. Adil didn't yell. He didn't throw anything. He didn't even look at Zaid. He just stared at me. And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. He was seeing me. Not the wife who made sure dinner was ready. Not the woman who shared his home but not his heart. He was looking at me. The woman he had promised forever to. The woman who had now betrayed him. And then, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. Was it worth it? His voice didn't waver. It wasn't full of rage or resentment. Just quiet resignation. That was the worst part. Because anger would have meant he still cared. Anger would have meant there was something left to save. But this? This was something else entirely. And I had no answer for him. Asterisk. Asterisk, the silence stretched between us like a chasm. And then Zaid moved. Not toward me. Not toward Adil. Just back. He didn't fight for me. He didn't speak. He didn't say a single word. Because he knew, just like I did, there was nothing left to say. Adil exhaled, slow, steady. And then he turned. Not in a storm of fury, not with any last words. He just walked away. Not because he didn't care. But because he knew it was already over. And just like that, I was left standing there. Between a man who had once been my everything. And another who was never meant to be mine. They say the worst part of a mistake is the moment you realize you can't take it back. That once the truth is out, no matter how much you want to rewind time, no matter how much you wish you had chosen differently, it's too late. I used to think silence was peaceful. That it was the absence of chaos, of tension, of pain. But now? Silence was the loudest thing in my house. Adil and I still lived under the same roof. But we weren't husband and wife anymore. We were strangers, passing each other in the hallways, sitting at the same table without speaking, existing side by side with nothing left between us. No fights. No accusations. No last attempts to fix what was broken. Just silence. And that was worse than any screaming match could have ever been. I wanted him to yell. To ask why. To give me something, anything, to prove he still cared, to prove that some part of him still wanted to fight for what we had. But he didn't. He just went through the motions. Cold. Distant. Detached. And the more days passed, the more I realized. This wasn't a phase. This wasn't something that would blow over. I had broken something that could never be repaired. Asterisk. Asterisk, one morning, I found the papers on the kitchen table. He had already signed them. No dramatic speech. No final words. Just a clean break. I stared at them, my hands trembling, the weight of everything settling onto my shoulders. This was it. The end of a marriage that had lasted for years. The end of the life I had known. And it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't full of anger or passion. It was quiet, effortless, like I had never even been worth the fight. Asterisk. Asterisk, I walked through the empty house that used to be ours, touching the things we had once built together. The framed pictures. The furniture we picked out. The memories of what we used to be, frozen in time. And I realized something. I had lost everything. My home. My husband. The stability I once took for granted. But strangely, I didn't regret the affair. I only regretted that it had to end. Because for the first time in years, I had felt something real. Something that reminded me I was still alive. The thing about choices is that you don't always get to undo them. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. Some lines, once crossed, stay with you forever. I used to wonder if I would regret it, if years from now, I'd look back on this moment and wish I had chosen differently. But I don't. For the first time in my life, I felt alive. Maybe that's why I did it. Maybe that's why I'll never regret it. Because for a brief moment, I was more than just someone's wife, someone's responsibility. I was wanted. I was desired. I was something more than what I had settled into. But some things aren't meant to last. And no matter how much you want to hold on to them, they slip through your fingers like sand. That's the price of wanting something you were never meant to have. Asterisk. Asterisk, maybe you're listening to this and shaking your head. Maybe you think I'm selfish, reckless, and unforgivable. Or maybe, you understand. Maybe you've been there, standing at the edge of a decision you knew was wrong but wanting it anyway. Maybe you've felt the weight of loneliness in a relationship that once made you feel whole. Maybe you've looked at someone who wasn't yours and wondered, just for a second, what it would feel like to be touched by them. Maybe this isn't just my story. Maybe it's yours too. Asterisk. Asterisk, if this story speaks to you, if you've ever felt trapped between what's right and what you need, then don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because sometimes, the biggest regret isn't the betrayal. It's never knowing what it feels like to be truly wanted. Asterisk.